G'day everyone, it's Richard from Another Castle again. I'm here with Peter from Whalehammer Games, and he's the creative director of Tahira, Echoes of the Astral Empire. Tell us what Tahira is all about.
So Tahira is a turn-based tactics RPG with a real emphasis on guerrilla warfare, and it's brought to life in a rotoscoped animation style inspired by my travels through the Middle East and Central Asia.
So what was it about your travels that inspired not only the creative decisions as well as the lore behind this game, but also the overall product?
Well, so I went traveling. I was in Syria, Jordan, and Israel in 2009, and it was probably like a good time to go. It was a bit safer at that point. And one of the things, as I was traveling across there, I was just like struck by is how many years of history and like culture they have, and how many different cultures there are across that whole region. And I felt like I hadn't ever, in Western sort of games at least, there hadn't been anything which really was inspired by that or addressed that. So for Tahira, first of all, we wanted to give it sort of that unique setting. And after what happened in Syria, like what's happened in Syria over the last couple of years, I really wanted to do justice to some of the sort of feelings that I was having, because I made some friends in Syria and I haven't heard from them since the war actually broke out there. So I create games. That's my kind of art at the moment. So I wanted to do something which sort of represented what I felt about that, and dedicate it to those sort of people, because they touched me when I was there. They were really nice, and I wanted to sort of pay that back to them in my little way.
I guess the segue from that would be, so this game is a strategy RPG. Is there a particular reason why it's that particular format? Because I believe this is the first time you've tried to tackle an SRPG.
When I was still studying 3D animation, I saw the Banner Saga get announced, and the thing that they did in that game, which was amazing, was they really tied the story and the gameplay together. And it's the first time I'd seen an SRPG do that with a more mature story. And so they just seemed like a very good fit, because you can tell a great story, you can contextualize the fighting, but then the player themselves, they get to do all the fun, interesting things like the big battles, and going back to a more gamey kind of thing. Yeah, you just get to play all the awesome bits, and then enjoy in your downtime, like when you don't have to think so much, just get a little bit of story. And I think they go really well together.
So how did the story come to you? Because I know you mentioned something about a princess. Do you mind just elaborating a little bit more on that?
Yeah, sure. So the story itself, it's about a princess called Tahira who comes home after many years away from her kingdom and finds it being attacked by this huge army. The world that she lives in, it's an abandoned colony world from when there was this huge spacefaring empire called the Astral Empire. That empire collapsed, and when it collapsed, this world got abandoned and left to its own devices. So it sort of plunged into a medieval dark age. So everyone's sort of living in medieval times. There are relics of the past around, but no one really knows how to use them. So it's a very brutal world. It's a world in decline. And so Tahira comes home. She has to pick up the pieces of her kingdom and start dealing with the fact that she's got a whole bunch of refugees who need her help. And it falls to you as the player to sort of make some social decisions, some decisions about the social, what's happening with your people, and that affects the battles as well as just the storyline as well.
So this is actually quite deeply rooted in politics, like current day politics that's happening in the region as well. Writing
is what I like. Is one of the things I really like to do, and that's the sort of thing I wanted to focus on. I wanted to build out a world where the cultures in it reflected the sort of what it was like to travel through these countries. In Australia we have Indigenous history, but we don't have, and that's really interesting. But there's not a lot of landmarks which are left behind by them. In the Middle East, you've got these different cultures that built their own cities and then abandoned them. And I find that really fascinating, and learning those stories. So I wanted to put some of that into our world.
I can definitely see that through the visual design as well. You can actually scan out the isometric viewpoint and you see some of the structures in the distance. I thought that was a very nice touch. One of the challenges with SRPGs is connecting with the characters. You go on this very long journey with them. Yep. Unfortunately, in some of them, they do feel like glorified grunts, or they feel like characters that are pretty much copy-pasted over one another. How are you approaching characters in this game in particular? Because you've got quite a wide cast. Do you have a recurring bunch of characters that join Tahira, or is it mainly focused only on Tahira?
So when you start off the game, it's just Tahira, but that's very much just the prologue. She's sort of traveling by herself. As you play through, you'll pick up more characters who'll travel with you, and they vary from. One of them is a general of Tahira's kingdom called Baruti, but you'll meet people on the road who'll join you, or they'll fight you, or you can have different interactions. It's very much an ensemble cast as it gets going. It goes from being, and that's sort of reflected in the way Tahira reacts to people, because at the start she's not ready to be a princess. The reason why she wasn't at her kingdom is because she sort of ran away, and she comes back and gets forced into this position of responsibility. And as more and more people start traveling with her, they become more and more a part of the story, and you watch her having to deal with interacting with way more people, leading a lot more people.
Now with SRPGs as well, are there any ideas, is there particular sort of design decisions that you gravitate towards, as well as are there other gameplay systems within that same genre that you want to steer away from?
One thing we were keen to do was to make it a little as realistic as we could. So we have something which is in D&D, which is attacks of opportunity. If you run past an enemy character, they will get a free hit on you. Just adds an element of realism, but a lot more tactical depth as well. I think probably the one thing that annoyed me the most in these games is Fire Emblem. You have a character, you're running them along, suddenly a whole bunch of enemies appear and just shoot down that character, and they're dead forever. Yeah. That is the most frustrating thing I've encountered.
And in XCOM as well, there can be cases where surprise enemy waves come in from behind after you've spent half an hour meticulously planning all of your units. It was all for nothing. So we're not having that, are we?
No, I promise that won't. Well, hopefully it won't. We won't do that to you.
One of the interesting scenarios I saw with Tahira is that there was the option to skip fights or be a diplomat throughout this dialogue. Is that going to be a prevalent sort of scenario throughout your game? How many scenarios, how many fights can you actually prevent or avoid entirely?
It's definitely something which I'm keen to put in. There are times that you can do it, like that one. It's something we don't want you to skip too many, because with the fights that we've got, they're, rather than just being a generic, you're in a small grid, you're fighting sort of thing, where they're much more designed than that. So there's some of them take 40 minutes to play through. But yeah, I'm trying to, as I write it, give you as many options as possible. You have different ways to approach the scenarios, and sometimes it cascades into the next level, a decision you've made. Other times it's just a small decision there that affects how that character reacts to you there. Maybe you learn something different about them in that moment, or maybe that affects your relationship with them as it flows through the game.
Okay, so can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, so in the scene actually after the one that we were playing through earlier, you meet a wine merchant on the road, and his wagon is broken. So you can decide to help him, but that'll cost you some time, and that's made clear in the dialogue. Or you can just move on. And that has two effects in the battle that follows that. If you help him, then some civilians who otherwise would have been alive when you arrive in that battle and you could have saved them, they're killed. And then also there are more enemies in that scenario, so it's actually a harder battle because you made that decision. But helping him, that also has effects later on as well. Yeah. We're releasing early next year, definitely probably late Q1 is the goal at the moment, on Steam for PC, Mac and Linux, and other digital retailers we're talking to Good Old Gamers at the moment. And we're also looking at potentially a PS4 release as well. Please keep your eye out for it. We have a mailing list on our website if you want to be notified when the game goes live. Yeah.
No, thanks a lot, Pete. Well, that was Tahira, and look forward to it, sometime next year. Cheers, mate.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Thank you. And that's it.